Back in the early 80s, I went to California to pursue acting. I was there for about a week and landed a motion picture. And I thought to myself, well, this isn't so hard. And then a couple of months later, there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, union writer's strike, and the whole town shut down. And I, like a lot of actors and florists and cameramen and everything else, started to starve. So I subsidized my income by doing modeling work. And one day a makeup artist handed me her business card and said, "You're cute, and if you ever want to do any nude work, call this number." And I remember being very gracious and said thank you, but of course I was thinking that will ruin my career, so I couldn't do that. Well, about a month after that, I was really starving. I think I had 2 cans, 1 can of little potatoes and 1 can of pork and beans. And I gave in to the temptation, made the phone call, and they said, "Be here at this time." And I showed up, and I made my first adult movie. And it was surprising how easy that was. I jumped on my motorcycle and I had 4 crisp brand new $100 bills, riding home thinking, what have I done? But at least I can eat. And I could act and do what they needed, so my phone rang. And pretty soon it started ringing a lot. The allure really was at first money. And then, to be absolutely honest with you, I was a red-blooded young man, and the idolatry really started to creep in with the sex part. Women became idols to me, along with the money. And then a whole new idol, fame. And it was a triple threat at that point. The first year I was in the business, it was just such a whirlwind of newness and influx of cash that it really took me about 1.5 to 2 years where it started to affect me negatively. The struggles, of course, were always with me the entire time. Being a Christian, knowing I was backsliding, the pain started to really set in of what I was doing. The realization, what I was doing to my family when my mother found out, my grandmother, my brothers, my friends. Shame started to creep in. And I started needing to find a way to bury that pain. And I wasn't hitting my knees enough. So I started to turn to drugs and alcohol. And it started to ruin my relationships and certainly my family relationships as well. God rescued me, plucked me out of that very, very dark place. One day, we'll jump ahead 25 years because that's how long I was in the business. I got into my car after a big movie, and all day long there's people catering to you and anything you need, what can we get you? And so I kind of would play that game of movie star when I was on the set, giving them everything that they wanted. Well, this one particular day, I got in my car I turned the key, started the vehicle, and drove about 1 block and pulled over and just absolutely broke down and wept. Because I knew I was hurting him so terribly and hurting myself, and I cried out to him in desperation at that point and said, "I've had enough, please. Please take me back." And that was a turning point. I felt his love and his forgiveness and his peace. And what came into my mind at that very moment was the story of the prodigal son. And I felt the Spirit say to me, "I am running towards you." And that was the turning point. I lost everything that was valuable to me: my wife, my children, my family, my sanity. And he reached down and he picked me up. At that very moment, my life changed. Because if he could save me, he can save anyone.
As soon as the camera started rolling, it's like Satan came to me and says, it's almost like I could see the devil say, "See, Shelley, everyone will love you now. I'll make you famous."
It's the kind of fame few people imagine.
It's like suddenly the producer went, "Where did you get this girl from?" And so immediately I went from doing maybe an amateur to doing professional adult films with some of the famous porn stars.
Shelley Lubin even won an award for Best New Rising Porn Star. But her claim to fame came with a high price.
It was destroying me. I lost my femininity. I lost any piece of Shelley on the porn set.
The girl from Glendora, California, never thought her life would come to this. As a child, Shelley gave her heart to Jesus Christ and hoped to become a preacher and a writer.
I loved God so much. He used to talk to me all the time when I was little. I used to write poetry about him. I used to walk around and preach the gospel to anyone who would listen. I just really loved him as a little girl.
Shelley's view of love crumbled the day her innocence was stolen.
When I was 9 years old, I was sexually violated by a teenage boy and his sister, which was my classmate. And I think carrying that around as a child, you don't know what to do with that emotionally. And so I was angry because I was curious about sex, and it made me feel love, but at the same time it felt dirty. So I just struggled with so much. So by the time I was a teenager, I just acted out.
Shelley buried the pain under sex and drugs. By the time she turned 18, her parents had had enough. She was on her own and desperate for cash, until someone offered her what seemed like easy money.
A nice man walked over to me, and then he put his arm around me. He says, "You know, there's a man in the apartment complex who thinks you're real pretty, and he wants to make love with you, and you can make $35. I went, oh, I was horrified. I mean, I'd had sexual intercourse before, but I had never prostituted myself. But then a part of me was like, you know what? I have no food. My parents don't care. God doesn't care. Why not? Because you know what? I don't care about myself anymore. And so I ended up being lured into the sex industry that way.
Prostitution turned into a way of life. She got pregnant by a client, but decided to keep her baby. Over the next several years, Shelley would wrestle with her lifestyle and the relationship she had with God as a child.
I never lost my faith in him, but I felt like I lost my trust in him. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone, and I needed to do what I needed to do. That was how I justified it.
Prostitution lost its allure. Shelley feared being raped or thrown in jail like other women.
And someone says, "Why don't you do porn?" I said, "Porn?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "I never even thought about that. Who do you talk to?" And she goes, "Yeah, do you know that they pay you like $2,000 for a movie?" I said, "For one movie?" I said, "Well, how hard can it be? It's probably just like prostitution, only it's legal, and I wouldn't go to jail." So that really appealed to me.
But what Shelley didn't know is the price she would have to pay as a porn star. Her first day on the set, she found out.
Right when I walked in, it's like this satanic, dark anointing just fell on me. It was creepy, it was dark, it was eerie, it was nothing like prostitution. It was like I knew that I was in the devil's territory. This was like the final frontier of Satan. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to do this.
Shelley went through with it, and her career took off. The fame and money became addictive. Behind the scenes, she fell apart.
I didn't think I could walk away from the porn because what other option did I have?
During her darkest moments, Shelley felt God's love reaching out to her, even sensing God's spirit before she would go before the cameras.
He used to come in the room and go, please don't do this. He really did. He said, Shelley, please don't do this. I said, well, you're not taking care of me. What am I supposed to do? And I'm good at this. They love me. They think I'm great. And my parents don't care. And God, you don't care. And Jesus says, I care. I bear it on the cross for you. I've already paid for all this. I'll forgive you. And I said, how can you forgive me? I've done so much. I've done so many bad things.
Shelley wasn't ready to surrender her life to the Lord, but she did give up on life as a porn star. She caught a sexually transmitted disease and quietly left the adult film industry. Her next big wake-up call came head on.
I got in a bad car accident, and my Miata went just like this. I thought for sure, I'm dead. I am going to die like this. I'm going to hell. That was my first thought. I am going to hell. And I landed totally perfect, not a scratch. I said, oh my gosh, God is so talking to me. I can never go back. I'm in big, what am I going to do, you know? And right after that, I met my husband, Garrett.
I was kind of at a low point in my life where I started using drugs. And when I met Shelley, here was this person who kind of, met me where I was at, and we were just best buds. I mean, we were inseparable. And I never pursued Shelley in a sexual way. It was more of a friendship way. Talks of the Lord and Jesus when we were younger started developing into a stronger friendship and ultimately realizing that, hey, this thing is going in a whole different direction.
The man who became her best friend soon became her husband. Together, Shelley and Garrett turned back to Jesus, and he helped them clean up their lives.
I really started looking at God as a father, not some meek God up in the sky with a scepter saying, follow the rules or you're in big trouble. God became a father to me.
God miraculously healed her incurable sexually transmitted disease, but her emotional recovery took much longer. She struggled to learn how to be a wife and mother to her 3 girls. She searched the Bible for answers.
I had to forgive everybody because I blamed everybody for everything. And so God taught me about forgiveness because, see, he forgave me. How can I not?
Shelley has also forgiven herself, and she's put the past behind her for good.
When you practice God's principles on purpose, they become part of your nature. It is part of my nature to do 2 Corinthians 10:5. It's just part of my nature to cast down any negative thoughts. It took me years to practice that because you can imagine I had a lot of thoughts that I had to cast down. Satan was like, here's a movie, here's a movie, here's a scene, here's a scene. Remember when you did prostitution? It was overwhelming during recovery, and so I had to choose God's word.
Shelley shares the freedom she found in Christ with her daughters and the world.
God says to me, that's right. Not 1 ounce of your pain will be wasted. I work all things together for good, Shelley. Jesus is faithful to me in everything. He is so faithful.
I knew that fame happened when I would go out in public and get recognized. That it wasn't just at porn conventions. And when it happened, I freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy said, hi, Angela, at the gas station. And I thought, oh, this is it, I've arrived. I remember coming home to this beautiful marble floor, gorgeous counters, and I went up on the counter and I just laid there and I cried. Because earlier that day, this old man was on top of me and he was sweating all over me and his sweat would drip into my eyes. And I just look and I just stare at the money because the only difference between rape in that moment was the money. And that's what my life became about. I no longer had friends. I didn't have my family. Money is what I'd have in one hand and a bottle of alcohol in the other when I went to bed. Pornography took everything. I love cooking. Obviously, by looking at me, I'm one of the only ones that know how to cook. That's why I have this size. And you definitely don't have to film that part. Pretend like I don't have any bad habits. So I had a great life. I was born 5'8". I've only grown 2 inches since 3rd grade. And my father was a preacher. I was constantly trying to better the world, be a better person, change lives. This is me as a youth pastor. I was about 21 years old in this picture, and this is what I looked like when I got raped. My whole dream of life was gone. Everything that I wanted to grow up to be died on the pavement. I went from that to a party, and this guy owned this website. The model had flaked, and I was like, sign me up. I didn't call myself a porn star because I know what I was doing. I just lost my virginity. I don't know up from down. But quickly people coached me. And I was booked, and I was $400. I now had the reality that there was a price tag on my body. There was harsh sex, but it took my mind off the pain. Like, if my sex was painful, and the harder and crazier it was kind of like the more you beat me up, the more you slap my face, the more violent you are to me. Like, maybe I deserve this. And that was my new life. And I remember hating when clients would say, I love you, Angela. I'm like, please, anything but that. You can do anything to my body, but do not say that you love me. Love was a word that messed me up big time. I would pop as many pills as I could get my hands on, and then just drink and drink and drink, trying to overdose. When I would wake up from my suicide attempts, I would get drunk, and like, it was that realization that I hated who I became. I hated money, and it was killing me. And at the very end, I called my parents when I said, I really messed up. That was the night my parents answered the phone. So through recovery, my parents have been there. When I traded in porn, I got my family back. Now we talk every single day. There is nothing that is worth the life I chose. Now that I'm out of the industry, I want to be a wife, and I want to be a mother. And one thing that I really want is I want to be a friend. I want the truth to be known about porn.
I produced porn for 9 years. I was a pastor's son. Absolutely hated the church. You know, I turned to porn because it gave me an opportunity to make a lot of money, plus throw it in the faces of the people, you know, from my past. We would recruit brand new models all the time, and these people would come in, and they'd usually be college students or something, but over the course of time, you could just see them change. You know, you could just see the life kind of get sucked out of their eyes. And I'm not saying that that happens in every case, but it happens so often that that you can't escape the fact that lives are being changed for the worse. I was not only hurting the lives of the girls who were modeling for me, but I was hurting the lives of their families. I was hurting the lives of my own family. And actually, toward the end, there's a few things that happened. My little boy told his mom that he knew what I did for a living. And, you know, I tried to act like it was no big deal, but it kind of It was a big deal. You know, I have a 7-year-old child who's, well, he was 6 at the time, and he's sitting there saying, yeah, Mommy, I know that Daddy takes pictures of naked people for work. The reason that XXX Church got my attention was because they would come right into the floor of the conventions that we'd have. When you see a group of people standing around handing out Bibles that say Jesus loves porn stars, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, this is what I'm thinking to myself. They're probably getting bashed by the church really hard for doing this. Why are they putting themselves through all of this? It was a lot harder to sit there and think, you know, this is all a bunch of garbage, because all of a sudden you're seeing what a Christian should be. You know, XXX Church definitely raises a lot of discussion amongst those in the industry. I mean, it's something that they talk about all the time. They wonder what's going on. You know, it raises questions. It's discussed on the message boards, you know, in the adult industry. They talk about the latest things that XXX Church are doing, especially if something comes out that's, you know, some new news story thing, like, you know, traveling with Ron Jeremy or something like that. People wonder if Ron's being a sellout, and other people say, nah, he's not being a sellout, he's being a good businessman. But the point is that the discussion's being made, and it's getting into people's head, I'm sure, just as it did in mine. The Esther Fund is really important because you can invite someone to leave the industry, but then you got to give them some sort of support. I went from a lifestyle where I got to do pretty much anything I wanted to do, and I had a lot of possessions, to a place where now I live in a tiny little apartment. You know, and the transition, I'm okay with it now, but the transition has been very tough. I had times when I'd be crying so hard that I puked. I'd have days when I'm, you know, definitely drinking too much. Here I am supposed to be a Christian, and you got to have someone to reach out to that's still going to hold your hand when you go through those times. September of 2006, I was driving back along Interstate 5 from Sacramento, where Playboy has an office, a production office. And they'd just offered us $4,000 a day to shoot a new lesbian series. And I'm ecstatic, you know, that's a lot of money. But at the same time, I'm going through this inner turmoil, and I just thought to myself, you know what, it's got to end now. You know, it's just got to end. And so I basically said, you know what, God, I'm just done with this. This is it. It was 2 weeks later, coming back along Interstate 5 again, and I just said, you know, God, I have all these questions that don't make any sense to me right now about the Bible, about Christianity, but I'm just going to trust you anyway. I gave my life to God that day, and the first thing I did was I called up XXX Church, and I says, I'm out. You know, that's it. I'm done. I just gave my life to God. And the very next day, they had one of their pastors fly out to my house and spend the next 3 days with me, just kind of encouraging me, driving around my area, just looking at stuff. Just, you know, we drove and we talked and we ate and we just basically, you know, bonded, and they were basically saying, look, you know, we're for real. We're not just sitting there saying, great, you're out, you're on your own. You know, some of the most difficult days I've ever had have been since I've become a Christian, but there's never been a desire to go back and start producing again. And despite the bad days that come, they far outweigh, the peace inside now far outweighs anything that I had before. And it gets better every day. I mean, now I'm going through the process of enrolling in seminary. Isn't that weird? I mean, that's crazy. Here's a guy who used to produce porn, and now he's enrolling in seminary, and upon completion, you know, from porn producer to pastor. What is that? You know, what else happened? I mean, that never happens. Well, it does now. I mean, through God, it definitely happens, and through people actually going out there and doing what he says.
Ethical boundaries. People are just more and more desensitized to just normal sex. It's true. And to the point where just two adults having sex isn't really going to get people off. You got to do anal, you got to do double penetrations, you got to do all these things. And now if you go to any porn site, you're pretty instantly going to get a pop-up of a girl who looks about 12 with braces taking a dick half her size. What they're trying to do is sell that like pedophilic fantasy And it's very common. Like, honestly, if you're a girl and you're 18 or 19 or 20 and you look underage, like, you are gonna get bucked. Like, fuck. They just want the most extreme things they can think of. I was on this set once in Florida. Florida is known for this, like, thriving amateur industry. Like, so many of these very young looking 18-year-old girls are coming from Florida, and I grew up in Florida, and it's because that culture is backwards as fuck, probably. That's from what I can say. I get a last minute booking for a scene. No one really told me anything. I didn't even know who I was working with, and I didn't usually care when it came to girls because they just are less problematic than guys for me. Let's leave it there. And when I get there, you know, we're getting makeup and stuff, the girls get there and they're literally like, they weren't just 18. They were 18 in December. They had both just turned 18 within the past couple weeks. Like, literally, these girls should have been in high school at this time. Like, they literally should have been sitting in a desk. Like, this wasn't the weekend. This was like a Monday. Why weren't you fucking in your senior year of high school? Like, what is going on? And like, no, oh, we dropped out. We dropped out of high school to do porn. You're not, I don't care who you are or where you're from, like, you're not ready to do something like porn when you're a senior in high school. So, it wasn't just like that, you know, that was what it was. Okay, you come from a bad background, you don't, you know, whatever the case, maybe porn could be good for you, maybe you'll make a lot of money, and maybe someone will be a good influence on you and tell you to save it, and everything will be fine, and you'll work for years and years, like fucking 10% best case scenario. But what really left me struggling not to cry constantly this day is they dress them up in little girl clothes from like Target. Like you know how you go to Target, you go to clothes, and there's just like women and juniors and little girls. The clothes were from there. They were from the little girl section. They were wearing little flat loafers like Catholic schoolgirls, and these like tiny little shirts and skirts that they hiked up, like, and those fluffy socks. And the girls already look fucking 12. And they put basic makeup on them and then dressed them up this way. So like, when I looked at them, I'm just like they literally wanted me to work with these girls sexually, and like, they look like children. They both were so tiny that if they were walking in like an elementary school line in front of me, like I would assume they're 6th graders. And it's not like, you know, I really wanted to just be like, I can't do this. But again, you know, word travels like super duper fast, and they were 18, and you know, I was like, I tried to make the best of it. And I was like, so you just turned 18, like, how are you here? And she's like, oh, I used to go to this house party when I was like, you know, 16, 17, and I met this guy, he's an agent. He told me I'd be this great big porn star and I would be so successful, and I really believed him, and he's sort of been just kind of like preparing me. So as soon as I turned 18, like, here I am. Like, literally some piece of shit, like 20-something-year-old glorified pimp is going to house parties with underage girls and convincing them to do porn. So, it's, and aside from that, you know, these people are probably going to get involved in bad things to begin with, but the producers just keep churning it out. They don't give a fuck, you know? They make millions of dollars a year off of shooting porn, and they feel the need to shoot elementary school girls, basically. So, you know, I just don't even want to be associated with shit like that. And I never tweeted or promoted that scene. I didn't like show people. I was ashamed that I did it, and I just take issue with that general culture in the industry.